Pizza. Everyone knows what it is and what it tastes like, and every country has different styles and variants, but nothing beats the true style of Italians. So today, I'm gonna show you how to make the pinnacle of pizza, the Neapolitan pizza. Hi, I'm Juan, welcome back to my channel. First, we're gonna start with the most important part of the pizza, the dough. So I'm starting off by using 500 grams of type 00 flour. For those who are wondering what those numbers mean on those packaging, those numbers refer to the ground setting of the flour in Europe, ranging from 00, which is the finest, to 2 being the most coarse. Having 00 flour, it is slightly less absorbent, so I'm using a lower hydration when it comes to this. So it will be about 60%. So with 500 grams of flour, I'm using 300 mils of water. We're gonna start off with our water. We're just gonna pour it into our bowl. And next, we're gonna pour in our yeast. So I'm using 1 gram of yeast for this. Give it a quick mix, let it all activate. Once you see the water is all murky, I like to slowly add in the flour and I mix as I go. So with 500 grams of flour, it will make about 3 pizzas. I like to add in about, I don't know, say about 20% of my flour at a time. So I know the yeast is perfectly incorporated with the flour. Just keep on kneading until the dough accepts majority of the flour. Once your dough has taken about 95% of the flour, it's time to start kneading on the bench. Now, important step is not all flour react the same, so some might be slightly more absorbent. I don't usually add all my flour at once. When I start kneading, if it does need a little bit more flour, then that's when I'll tend to add some more. Okay, now this is the part where I start kneading it aggressively and add in more flour if it does need any more. You can use a stand mixer for this. I'm just showing that you can do it all by hand. Now you want to knead this quite thoroughly because you are doing it by hand and doesn't have the same power as a stand mixer. It may take about 10 to 15 minutes depending how fast you do this. So after about 20 minutes, the dough has accepted all the flour. It is looking nice and smooth. There is no tears as I'm kneading it. This is when I start adding in the salt to the dough. I am using 15 grams of sea salt. The reason why I just like adding it towards the end, I just feel like yeast and salt don't go together, so the later the better. Okay, I'll put it all on the outside and then I'll knead it as I go. Knead it for a further 5 minutes until all the salt has dissolved in the dough. So after about 5 minutes, the salt has all dissolved. We'll flip it over. You can see the dough is perfectly smooth. It should have a nice little springback texture to the dough. So what we're gonna do next is now let it rest. What we have here is just a piece of baking paper. We're just gonna cover it and let it rest for about 2 to 4 hours. All right, 2.5 hours has passed. Let's have a look at the dough. You can see the dough has matured very well. It's not a lot of growth, which you expect from only 1 gram of yeast. It's time to start cutting it up into individual pieces. All right, we're just gonna cut them up into 3 individual pieces. Each of them should weigh about 250 grams each. Next, we're gonna form our dough balls. So exactly the same as our burger video. You wanna pinch the sides into the center until all the sides are done. And then once you've completed that, flip it over and roll it until it's completely smooth. Once I've completed that, I just simply like to pinch the bottom so I know everything is completely formed. And there we have it, our first dough ball. I was going to repeat the same steps with all the others. Second. Next, we're going to let it rest one last time. This will be the timely process. It can take anywhere between 6 to 12 hours. I like to leave it for at least 12. Firstly, I've got a baking sheet here lined with a sheet of baking paper. Now you want to make sure that each dough has a bit of space away from each other because it is going to expand at least double the size. If you don't have a proofing box, any airtight container, I'm just going to use 2 baking trays and then put some Glad wrap over them. Seal it up and set it aside in a cool place for at least 12 hours. If you are going to use the fridge to let it rest, I recommend letting the dough double in size before you put it in the fridge. While that dough is still resting, we'll get started on our tomato base. Now, today I'm using San Marzarno tomatoes. The reason why most people do use these tomatoes, they are naturally sweeter in flavor, which is perfect for our Neapolitan pizza. Pour the entire content of the can into the bowl, including the water. Now, a very important step here is to only hand crush these tomatoes. The reason being is the seeds do tend to become quite bitter if you do blend them, so hand crush is recommended. Once your tomato mixture looks like this, it's ready to go and we are ready to assemble our pizza. Before we get started with our dough, we want to preheat the oven as hot as possible. For my oven, it is 250 degrees Celsius, so we'll let that heat up for about 30 minutes. All right, after about 12 hours in a nice cool place, let's have a look at these. You can see the dough has perfectly matured, no major air bubbles, because if there was, there would be too much yeast in the dough, but it is looking very well and it's time to start making our pizza. To start off with our dough, we're gonna need a big handful of semolina just so it doesn't stick while we're working with it. We'll first off start grabbing our first dough. Okay, we'll start off by laying that down, sprinkle some semolina on over the top. First things first is we wanna try not push out all the gas, so gently from the middle onwards, press a little bit out. Okay, once that's sorted, flip it over, push for about 1 inch out of the crust. Flip it over again. Now gently work the dough. Once your dough has all been stretched out, you want a generous helping of the tomato base that we just previously made, followed by a small pinch of sea salt. The next ingredient I'm using is basil. This is all personal preference where you want to put it in before or after the pizza is cooked. I'm putting it now before the cheese because I am using a normal oven at home. I want the cheese to melt over the top of it so it doesn't burn the basil. Next and last piece will be the fresh mozzarella, which we cut up from before. It's always best to use fresh mozzarella because it doesn't burn due to the moisture. I like to put a piece of mozzarella over each basil leaf so I know that it won't burn and the cheese will cover and it will not burn the basil. Last step is to put it on our pizza peel. So I'm just gonna lightly dust it with semolina so it doesn't stick over the top of it so we can slide it onto our pizza stone. And next, it goes in the oven for about 5 minutes. A very important step is to slide the pizza in as fast as possible and close that door. We want minimal heat to escape that oven. Because it's not as hot as, say, a wood fire oven, we want that heat retained as much as possible. After about 5 minutes, your pizza should look like this. And there we have it, the best Neapolitan pizza you can do in the oven. Light, crispy, salty, flavorsome. Hear that crunch. Time for the taste test.